The Rio Grande Bosque is a place of special meaning for many of us. So when city officials put forth a plan to increase access and recreation in the state park, emotions got very heated at a recent public meeting. The conceptual plan calls for boardwalks, new trails, pedestrian bridges, and viewing platforms to allure more visitors. But opponents say the city needs to consider the impact on the river's ecosystem. NMAF correspondent Gwyneth Dolan sat down with a city official and conservationists to talk about plans and alternatives to the Bosque's future.
With me today is Matthew Schmader, the city's superintendent for open space, Richard Barish of the Sierra Club, and Anthony Anella, an architect and conservationist who serves on the board of the Aldo Leopold Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in today to talk about the Bosque. Recently, an Albuquerque Journal poll asked, do you support or oppose the city's general proposal to increase access to the Rio Grande and the Bosque by adding things such as path trails, pedestrian bridges, boardwalks, and viewing platforms? 69% said yes, they approve. So why did most of the 200 people at a recent meeting seem to oppose all or portions of this? Richard?
Well, first of all, just addressing the poll itself. The poll asked a very kind of simple question, and it really didn't give the kind of information that you would want in order for people to have to make an informed decision. For instance, it didn't tell people that if these developments were put in, it would have a very serious adverse effect on bird life in the Bosque. It didn't tell people these improvements were going to cost $2.9 million. And of course, there's shortfalls in many areas of government. There's deferred maintenance that is not getting done in many places. And that money people may well think that money could be used better elsewhere. So the reason that people at these public meetings are so fiercely in opposition to this plan is that there will be this adverse effect on birds and wildlife in the Bosque. And the reason that we know that is that Hoxaloft has done bird surveys all up and down the Bosque, including in an area in Rio Rancho where they put in very similar type development. And when that happened, the bird numbers plummeted. So we know that it's going to have that adverse effect. And plus, the thing that makes the Bosque just such a wonderful place to visit is that, you know, within a few minutes of anywhere in Albuquerque, you can be in this area that's nature. You're enjoying the beautiful forms of the cottonwood trees, all the birds, the river, the mountains in the background, and these kind of highly developed trails, these kind of developed places change the experience from one of being in nature, to being in an urban park.
Matt, we've already got a paved road through a lot of the Bosque. The Paseo del Bosque Trail is 16 miles of asphalt that attracts cyclists locally and nationally. Sunset Magazine called it one of the 20 best bike trails in the West, and it was one of the reasons cited by National Geographic when the magazine listed Albuquerque as one of its best places to live and play. So what is the city going for here? I mean, what is the hard part for you with having the Bosque be a big attraction and having it also be sort of a wild space?
Well, everything that we do is about trying to balance the natural desire for people to get into the great outdoors with managing the ecology and the habitats that we also have. So balance is what it's all about. The Bosque Trail is very popular for very good reasons because people want to get out into the great outdoors. But some of that activity that happens, it's faster riding and everything like that, so it's better that it's not in the woods. We don't want to have that kind of activity in the woods, and that's why we've got the Bosque Trail itself.
That paved trail runs pretty close to the ditch, doesn't it, to the arroyos that are...
It's up on top of the levee, and it runs all the way from Alameda down to south of Rio Bravo. It's 19 miles in one direction, so it's a real asset. But the fast riding that happens up there needs to stay up there, and the intent on trying to create consolidated trails is to be sure that people aren't making their own user-made trails, because as it is now, there are a lot of user-made trails, and so it's about trying to manage the way people want to get out into the great outdoors without abusing the environment.
I've noticed that too. You know, I take a lot of dead-end trails and end up in the middle of nowhere and come back thinking, now I've just helped create a path that goes nowhere. Tony, I want to ask you, I'll get back to you, Richard, in a sec. Tony, if this is a balancing act between people and their enjoyment and between the natural world, how do we figure that out? I mean, we've got a million different opinions on that. How do we figure it out?
Well, first I'd like to say that I have the highest respect for Matt Schmader. It is thanks to Matt and people like Vincent Griego that Albuquerque has a national reputation for our open space. But I disagree with Matt when he says that the city is taking a balanced approach on this. Because if it were balanced, the conservation scientists would have had a primary role in informing the design and planning. And that's not happening.
They're
The
coming from
process is wrong.
The people perspective more than the environment perspective in the balance?
Well, I'm not sure where they're coming from, but to do it right, the restoration ecologists and the conservation scientists should have a primary role. They should come before the design process.
What do you think they'd do differently if we did it from that perspective? What would they have suggested?
I think they would have let the Bosque do most of the talking, rather than some landscape architects and planners imposing an a priori or plan on the Bosque. You know, where is the best access point in order to minimize the disruption to bird habitat? We have a true gem running through the length of Albuquerque. What other city in America can boast of this gem? We need to protect it intelligently. So, you know, the mayor's plan calls for the design drawings to be 95% complete by either January or the spring. And then for the environmental assessment to occur later. We urge the mayor to just please slow down so that we can get this right. There's an old saying, the wise carpenter measures twice and cuts once. And we hope that the mayor will listen to that, because once we cut into the Bosque, there may be no coming back.
Richard, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, and let me just add to what Tony said. There's nothing that's really anti-people about having conservation drive what happens in the Bosque. The thing that makes the Bosque a wonderful place for people to visit is the nature down there, are all the wonderful birds that you see down there, and then the beautiful trees. So we want to keep that place as a place where people can go and enjoy nature. And the way that you really help them to do that is not by putting development in the Bosque, but by making the Bosque a more welcoming place. And one way you can do that, and this is actually in the first phase of implementation around Central Avenue, is to improve the parking. So people, you know, a lot of the entrances to the Bosque are just curb cuts at the ends of bridges, and you drive in there and it's just dirt. There's no sign saying welcome to the Rio Grande Valley.
As a woman, it's a little scary sometimes.
Yeah, it can be a little scary, and you just don't even know that there's a trail there that you can hike on. So improve that, you know, improve the parking, improve the signage, and we really want to get people down there enjoying the Bosque, but the way to do that is not to put these highly developed features in the Bosque.
Matt, from the city's perspective, how do you believe that the items in this plan will help people appreciate the nature that's there?
Well, now we are talking about the points of substantial agreement, because I respect both of these gentlemen highly too, and there is a lot of agreement. Access, information, education, Bosque management, trail management, all of those things are really primarily important. And we are really in a position with the Bosque where we cannot do nothing. If you just leave things as they go, then our cottonwood forest is getting older, the non-natives are coming in, people are cutting their own trails, and so it still is about management and about trying to get people into the great outdoors. So, you know, I think one of the reasons that there were high numbers on the poll is that people, it resonates with them when they hear the word access. They want to be able to get in.
It interested me that 81% of the younger respondents said they wanted this, and I'm not sure what that means, but I do think there is, you know, there are a lot of very fancy houses that back up onto the Bosque. And a lot of people who live in very fancy neighborhoods in the North Valley especially have great access. But a lot of people who don't live near it don't understand how to get there, how to get in there, what to do, how would your plan help people who aren't already Bosque lovers and visitors?
It really is about creating the safest, most welcoming environment that you can find. And it's really about education. You know, if we don't create our next generations of environmental stewards, then it's going to be lost. And we all agree on this. I want to see that emphasis on education, but until we bring kids into the woods, they don't know what it is that they want to or should fall in love with. We want to get people to fall in love with the woods and teach them the environmental ethic that's needed.
There is a very inspirational program, the Bosque Ecosystem Monitoring Program, that's run by the University of New Mexico, thanks to Dr. Crawford, and the Bosque School. And it's inspiring how they use the bosque for educational purposes. You know, one of the things we're in favor of is using some of the money to pay for taking Albuquerque public school students, maybe fifth graders, all fifth graders in the city of Albuquerque, down to the bosque. And that place is only valuable as a destination for them if its ecological system is maintained. And so that's why we think that the conservation science needs to be driving this. And I think we are all on board. It's just how this process has gotten ahead of itself. We need to slow down and do it right.
You know, one of the elements of the plan is a path or a road, depending on what team you're on. It's 8 to 10 feet wide and done with crusher fines, those little flat pieces of gravel that a lot of us have in our gardens and we see in commercial landscaping. Richard, you guys, the Sierra Club, you don't love this idea. Why?
Correct, and these are the two reasons that I stated earlier. Number one is that we know from the studies that Hawks Aloft has done in Rio Rancho that this is going to result in a decline in bird numbers. It may also affect other animals like amphibians and reptiles that would want to cross that path, that may segment or fragment their habitat. And the second reason is it just changes the experience. When you're on it, it's not just a path, but they have 4 wooden bridges, and they've got 4 viewing platforms, and they've got a boardwalk. It really makes it feel much more like you were in an urban park than being in a wild, natural place.
Is there something wrong with that?
No, but what I want to try to point out is that the reason for doing studies, because we've committed to doing ecologically sound studies for an entire year, is to drive the decision-making process. So if the data end up showing that it's a bad idea to put something in a certain place, it won't be done. Granted that designers need to make designs, but the reason that the design work needs to be done is so the public has something to look at and be able to react to.
You got to put something on the table so we can fight over it.
We haven't really had a good open and really well-engaged kind of discourse to look at what the range of alternatives are. We certainly have heard what the public is starting to not want to see, but that isn't necessarily entirely driven by what's on the ground. We have to do baseline studies. There are many places already in the bosque where there are crusher fine trails, and I don't think all the birds have gone away. That isn't saying I think that we should just go ahead and do it, but we have to have the time for a study. Just like Tony has said, that's going to take an entire year to complete, and if it's not advisable to have a consistently wide trail of certain surfaces in certain places, it just isn't going to happen.
The time, we do have to have the time, but equally important is the timing or the sequencing. The study needs to precede the design work. I, as an architect, know that when you have design drawings that are 95% complete, there is a built-in momentum that's hard to stop. This plan, the design work, is not being informed by the ecological studies.
Yeah, there's a debate there. I'm getting that. Let me ask you this, Tony. One of the elements of the plan is to put some sculpture in the Bosque. And some folks may say little pieces of public art. Am I right? Some sculpture?
It wouldn't be in the Bosque anyway.
It wouldn't be in
I
the
think
Bosque?
the only discussion or mention of any artwork is alongside of some of the access points. So I don't
Well,
believe that that's actually.
If I can address that, in the current plan for the area between Central and I-40, there's no plans for artwork in the Bosque. In the broader, more general Rio Grande Vision Plan, they do show artwork in the Bosque, and if you look at the implementation sections, there's money for artwork in the Bosque.
So this
it's
brings
possible.
me to a philosophical point that I'd like you to wax on a little
Okay.
bit here. You know, some folks say, great, more public art, yes, yay, we want to do this. And some people say, are we in this rural wilderness oasis in the middle of a city to look at more art, or are we here to look at nature?
Exactly. I've done public art for the city of Albuquerque. I love art, but there are places where we need to go where nature is preeminent.
And so isn't the debate here, Richard, over how we can best get people in there in numbers that respect the environment and the critters there, but but getting more of them involved so they have a stake in keeping it? Is that?
Well, I think that's an important question, but also the real question is, what are we getting people in the Bosque for? And the Bosque does one thing spectacularly well, and that is provide a natural place where you can enjoy nature. So the question is whether we want to have that as the principal focus of any plan, or whether we also want to just make it a more general urban type park where you might have artwork, where you might have dog runs, or whatever. And from my perspective, I think we want to make it as a place where people will go to enjoy nature, and we want to be very careful that anything we do in the Bosque does not adversely impact that nature, the bird life, and so forth.
Matt, you know, some critics have said that this plan, if it's implemented as we're looking at it right now, is going to result in the city putting dumpsters in there for all the extra trash, a road for police vehicles to make routine patrols, spotlights at night, and more bicyclists going really fast. Is that what's going to happen here?
Well, I think, you know, it's this is all about being well informed and well educated and trying to analyze what's really being proposed. And I don't foresee any of those things happening. Of course, you've got to have a trash can, but you're not going to have big roads that the police vehicles are riding up and down on, or spotlights, or any of the things that you've talked about. It's just not contemplated.
In your vision, and briefly, what should the Bosque look like 5 years from now?
The Bosque needs to look like it is well cared for, well managed. We need to have more restoration activity. We need to have better management of responsible public use. It needs to have places where kids can go down and learn about it, and places where people who have differential abilities and disabilities can get some access to be able to enjoy it.
And to put that in real words, you mean people with wheelchairs and these can get up on these boardwalks and actually look at the river?
There does need to be some kind of access for people with different abilities. We all can enjoy it because we can get around, but older people or people with lesser abilities can't always go to all these places, so we need to create some opportunities for them as well.
We've got 2 minutes left, so I want to ask you, what should the Bosque look like in 5 years?
An improved ecosystem so that it's worth visiting.
Does that mean it should look like what it looked like 500 years ago or 50 years ago? 500 we can't do, I know.
Wasn't around then. I guess the main point I'd like to make is just let ecosystem, ecological science drive it. So 5 years from now, it looks like an improved ecosystem that we can all be proud of.
Good point. Richard?
I agree with what Tony said, so that the area between the levees, inside the levee, should mostly be left undisturbed, undeveloped. But as Matt said, some improvements for access for people with differing abilities. Perhaps some other relatively minor development within the Bosque. Improve the access points so people can know that this is a welcoming place where they can walk, and improve the amenities at at the entrance points. You know, restrooms, public art would be great there. Maybe better landscaping, just make it feel like it's a welcoming place to visit. But essentially, inside the levees, most of that area should be left undeveloped.
Last thing, Matt, when is or how can people find out more information and give input and share their opinion?
They can always contact the city through a number of different websites, the mayor's office. We really want to have this be a public input. We're listening to the people. The public process, the positive kind of suggestions coming from Sierra Club and from people like Tony are really valuable.
So go online and find out more information on the city's website. Is there a form you can send or a number you can call?
There is a form that you can fill out on the city's website.
We'll have that website on our website. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.